outdoors, because that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be going to the beach, and we're going to be doing a lot of outdoors things, which is fantastic. I am going to be introducing you to 4 really fantastic makers who are all part of an organization called Design Nation. So Design Nation is an organization that is based in the UK. And it's a collective, it's a portfolio of makers, and the mission of Design Nation as an organization is to provide them support in connecting them to patrons like you, to galleries, in offering possibilities to show their work at events, and also in providing them with business support so they can grow their practice and they can get the support that makers often need, because they often single unit operations and you can't do everything. So it's really nice to have that kind of support. And I want to say also that Design Nation was founded by a woman who had the same ethos that we do of supporting makers and nurturing that world of craft. Her name was Peter Levi. And today, to represent Design Nation, we have Hayley Banks, who is the membership director for the organization. So we have today 4 incredible women who are makers of Design Nation. We have Alison Brown, who is on the beach in Devon. Alison is a ceramicist and a contemporary jeweler. Then we will meet Bridgette Macklin, who is also a ceramicist, a little bit up on the coast, and I'll show you a map in a minute. We then jump to Lucy Spink in her garden. And Lucy is there, and we finish with Helen Eastham. Sorry, Lucy is a jeweler, and we finish with Helen Eastham, who is a glass artist and who right now is in her house, but in a minute is going to just jump in her car and drive to the top of the cliff, where she's going to be showing us her glass work in the sunset. I hope. I'm really waiting for that moment of the sun on the glass. It's going to be amazing. So when we talk about craft, there is often that sacred trilogy of people, space, and process. People, place, and process. And today it's definitely the place element that we are going to be concentrating on, because the places where we're going to be taking you to have a fundamental impact on the practice of these makers, on their inspiration, on their process, on their ethos, on the message that they share with us through their work. And you will also see that through their work, if we choose to, we can bring some of our roots and have that connection with our own location and our own roots. And that will come apparent to you as we talk to these makers. We're going to give you a lot of the vista, or as much as we can. And that, to me, is something that I have really enjoyed in the past 18 months, that technology that is so, a little bit jarring, but really brings us to these locations. And in the few trips that we have done digitally, as we are doing now, and I think, Jane, you were on one of them, and Doreen too, we did feel at the end of the trip that we had been there. And that contrast between technology and the heritage element that is inherent to craft. Craft has, we all try through craft to preserve and nurture that heritage element through the skills, through the history, through all the other elements of craft, but we bring it in our contemporary lifestyle without changing its nature, hopefully. And that colliding, and then ultimately that mixing of 2 very important elements, that technology and that heritage, makes contemporary craft so interesting and so easy to bring in our lives. And I think intellectually, it's such an interesting contrast. So without further ado, I want to put the spotlight on Alison, and Alison is on the beach in Devon. What is the name of your beach, Alison?
This is Regis Beach, or Lime Bay. So if Robin, my able assistant, can show you what I'm looking at the moment, it's just stunning. It's a beautiful afternoon. It's not raining, which is a miracle in itself. And it's not busy either, which is fabulous. So this is one of our favourite beaches. I love it because although the backdrop that you can see now is of cliffs that are eroding, and all of this Jurassic coast is very prone to landslips, which is a real shame. But what it does reveal, and which is the treasure for me, is up here, years and years and years ago, was an old dump, the old town dump for Lyme Regis. And so every time there's lots of rain, it all washes down, all the stuff that was thrown away and discarded. And for me, this is treasure. I've got all sorts of rusty metal, which might not sound terribly interesting, but I love the textures, and using found objects and recycling is really important for me, trying to avoid using new materials if I can use old pieces. But also the bits that tell me when to stop, because I can go on for a long time. I can use what I find down here for textures to texture my porcelain ceramics, and I'll show you some of those when we go back home in a bit. But you can just find amazing things. This area in particular is renowned for fossils. And there's a lady back in the Victorian times called Mary Anning, who as a 12-year-old found one of the first complete, I think it was a plesiosaur, but I'm not sure. But it was a staggering find, and it was Victorian times, she was female, it was a real struggle, but she was completely addicted to fossils. And there's a fantastic book, which I meant to bring down here, that Tracy Chevalier wrote a brilliant novel about Mary Anning, which is based on a lot of fact, and really brings this area to life. So we also, along with all the discarded detritus from domestic places, look, I've got an old tile with a really interesting pattern underneath, so I can use that to texture porcelain for beads or bowls or something like that. We've also, don't know what that is, but it's quite interesting to me. I can use that for something, I'm sure. But also we've got fossils. So we've only been down here about half an hour, and this isn't a very good example. I don't know whether you can see that clearly, but that's part of an ammonite just around there.
Yes, we can see.
And that, what's that? I don't know, but it's very old. It's like it's sort of an eye, isn't it? Love it. Anyway, so I can show you. This is a good example, actually, of the kind of things, the treasures for me that I find down here on the beach. So this is an ammonite. You can see it's big. And then beside that, we've got an old gas or an electric element, another spiral. And then we've also got a shard of a thrown pot. So these are all things that interest me and that somehow find their way into my work. So this is my trapper basket, based on Adirondack hunting baskets. Well, very loosely based, I have to say, because they're wood and this is wire and metal. But what have I got in here? I've got a piece from a electric element. Don't know what that is, but you know, letters are quite useful to use when you're stamping in. And then I've got, is that from an Orangina bottle? Might be. Just a bobbly glass. And here are two ammonites as well, on both sides. Amazing, aren't they?
So tell me, why is it, how did you get into that concept of reusing? And you do that both for your sculpting practice and for your contemporary jewelry. Where did the whole idea start from?
It started from Blue Peter. I don't know whether Blue Peter made it to Canada. It was a children's program that was on, was it once or twice a week? And they always had an item where they showed you how to make toys or presents for grandma or Valentine's cards and things like that. But it was always using what you had around the house. And it always involved sticky back plastic and match boxes. And I used to be really annoyed because my dad didn't smoke. So we never got through very many matchboxes. Yeah, you could make dolls' houses and all sorts. And that was my introduction to making something, because I could see it in my mind how I wanted it to look, and I could use those, whatever I had around me, to make that image in my head into 3D. And I always did that when I was at school. I loved needlework class because I could make my own clothes. Fantastic. And I could make them just how I wanted them, so they'd be completely unique. And I think that's a thread that's run through my work for the last quite a long time, 50 or plus years, that I love the original, I love the quirky, I love the unique, I love the bespoke element, so that and just having this idea that you've drawn down in your sketchbook and you can make manifest and make it come alive, and that's kind of my inspiration.
And now the jewelry that you make is not the regular kind of jewelry as we know it. I mean, sometimes it's almost performance jewelry, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it is. And I hadn't realized that. I hadn't realized that the big necklaces that you saw at Collect a couple of years ago be wearing were performance. But of course, that's what we do. When we get dressed in the morning, it is for a performance, whether it's to hide or it's to be seen and hello, here I am, this is my character, this is what I love. That's what we do when we put on our clothes in the morning. That's what we do when we choose what jewelry we want. And for me, it's fun. It's fun to have something that somebody in the shop, or when you're going to have your COVID jab, comes up and goes, oh, I do like your necklace. That's really unusual, isn't it? You know, because it's a conversation starter. And I did have some lovely conversations with some ladies that came over with your group from Canada a couple of years ago at Collect in London. Yeah, it's an introduction, and it's sort of a, yeah, you can't be too serious, can you?
I agree. I'm going to actually share some images of your work. So I know that we're going to be going to your studio a little later, but and actually, in fact, what I wanted to do first was to just show that I should have done that at the beginning. I apologize. A quick map of where we are right now. We are on the peninsula right here, and we're going to be traveling around the peninsula. So this is your mark, and this is the basket that you have around your neck right now, where you collect all your treasures. I wanted to show the intricate work of this little object. And here we have the latest piece that you have made with the stones, what you have found. But on the left, I think that's the necklace that you were wearing in London when I saw you, that gigantic necklace.
That's right, yes.
Yeah. What did you make this necklace with?
That's porcelain. So I always use porcelain because it's a luxury object, it's a luxury material, but its properties are fantastic. You can roll it out really, really thin to about 1 millimeter, and yet it's incredibly strong. These electrical elements that we find on the beach that I use for texture are made of ceramic because they are really strong. You know, this has lasted dozens of years. And you know, people sometimes think, oh, porcelain is really delicate, and it can be delicate, but actually it is incredibly strong because the particles are so fine, they mesh together, and it's high fired as well in the kiln. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I just love using porcelain. It also, because it's so white, you get some fantastic glazes. So when we go back, I'll show you some of the glazes that I enjoy using.
Do you use any of the elements that you find on the beach in your objects other than just to stamp and mark? Do you incorporate it in the porcelain?
Sometimes, yes. The one that you saw, the big green necklace that I was wearing, that has got nails that I fired in the porcelain. And they bloat and they change and they alter because of the high temperatures. But that's what's so interesting, and it's unique. So everything I make is kind of unrepeatable. They're completely one-offs, and that's what I love. You know, you open the kiln and you go, oh, wow, look at that.
In terms of creating, I mean, showing the roots, I mean, you obviously you do a lot of beachcombing and you have it right there. Other inspirations at the moment, you have pieces at an exhibit at the museum in Cornwall, I think. And
that's right, yes. Yeah, I had one of the installations featured 3 trapper baskets, and I made some 3 dresses, and one was using an old silk, old linen, white linen sheet that I'd had for years. And Robin is always telling me, can't you get rid of some of this fabric? Well, we all know that's impossible. It'll all come in useful sometime. Anyway, I finally gritted my teeth and cut up this old linen sheet, which was just beautiful to touch. And touch is really important for me. Texture is really important. And I realized in the bottom corner, which I incorporated into the dress, was the name of, was a you know, a embroidered name tape of a lady that I knew that used to go to our old church and who it belonged to. But also below that was another name and the date of 1880. It's over 100 years old, and it's beautiful, beautiful fabric. No holes, no, it's not gone thin at all. And that's what I love. Anyway, so I've made 3 dresses, and they've all featured a trapper basket, and of course they're all different. But one of them, it was all about walking, because when I'm walking along the beach, I'm looking, you know, head down. Oh, can I find a shell? Can I find? Oh, look, there's some feathers. Oh, look, just found a shell. There you go. There's a shell.
Where did you find?
A shell.
Oh, a real shell.
Yes. You don't find many shells down here because there's so many large rocks that they get smashed up. So that, yeah, that's going in the basket. So the trapper baskets were about walking and collecting whilst you're walking. So one time I said, right, I've got to do it. I've left my phone at home, so I'm going to collect sounds. And so that's what I did. I got an old typewriter, and I remembered as I was walking, memorizing my walk with the dog, down to the woods during lockdown, all the sounds that I heard, the birds, a dog barking, cows, lots of cows around where we live, that sort of thing. And that was a collection for me of sounds that you could make into a poem that was tight and popped into a basket.
So I'm going to share it again. I shared the photo of your basket in wire that has the porcelain fish in it.
Yes.
Can you share with us the story of that piece?
Yeah, those wire containers, and that one's quite large. It's about 45 centimeters. And I started when lockdown happened in the UK last year in March. I think for nearly everybody was sort of bereft, you know, completely disorientated. But I decided that this was an opportunity to make something new. But we were all feeling sort of fairly despondent and down. And so I picked up some old wire that I'd used before in some work, but I'd never made baskets, and I've always loved baskets. I do have quite a collection of them. And started weaving and making, and these got bigger and bigger and bigger until they became really big, huggable wire traps. And I saw them as fish traps because I'd make them sitting next to my goldfish pond. And for me, fish are really inspiring. They do often appear in my work. And we were given all these instructions. You can't do this, you can't talk to this, you've got to wear a mask, you've got to do this. And it felt like we were trapped in our own homes. And I wondered whether the goldfish felt trapped in their goldfish pond, which might be overthinking things a bit. But I was also reminded when I was making these of the fish traps made out of bamboo and grass that I'd seen in the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford, which is my favourite museum. I love ethnological museums, and this one is a real collector's haven. It was a chap, Mr. Pitt Rivers, back in the Victorian times, who just used to collect and collect, and they were literally piled up into cabinets. It's just a fantastic place to get inspiration. And I remembered seeing these bamboo fish traps and thinking, oh, here we go. There's some connections here with the goldfish. Are they trapped in my pond, or am I keeping them safe? Are we being trapped in our own homes during lockdown, or are we being safe? Those are the kind of ideas that were going through my head when I was making these. But there was also, I found it very meditative, actually, just going around, because I've got an idea kind of what shape I want, but the wire is a better idea of what shape it's going to do. So again, you have to go with the flow and see where it takes you.
So your practice is very immediate in the sense that it is very connected with what is happening in your life, your immediate surroundings and your immediate life, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I haven't answered you about the mackerel container. Yeah. So the mackerel are the fish in the wire basket. The question was, have they been trapped? Are they safe? Are they being looked after? Those are the kind of sort of juxtapositions that I was looking at. But when they were showed there was a security issue. So I had to firmly wrap them up in sea twine that I'd found on the beach further along. I don't know whether, Robin, can you show Charmouth Beach, which is in beautiful sunshine at the moment? Well, down there, you can get loads of sea twine. So we often go down there after storms because all this nylon that's been cut from fishing trawlers. Oh, and I've got here, we pick up from the beach. And it's reusing stuff that otherwise would be actually dangerous for marine life. And so that was another reason to use it to tangle up the fish, the porcelain fish, but I was actually keeping them safe from inquisitive hands in the museum at any rate.
I wonder if there are any questions in the audience. If you want to, it's just a few of us, so if you wanted to unmute yourself and if you have any questions to Alison, we're going to meet Alison a little later in her studio. But if there are no questions, I think, Alison, it was an amazing explanation of your work, and it's so nice to see how the local environment and what's happening is making its way in your practice. So I'll let you switch off, jump in the car, drive home, and we'll see you. We'll see you in about an hour.
Thank you. And if any of you want to come down, I'm very happy to show you where the fossils are and the treasures.
I might just do that. Maybe we'll bring a group. It would be amazing.
Oh, that'd be nice. I'll put on the weather for you as well. I'll arrange it.
Fantastic. Let me now move the spotlight on Bridgette. Bridgette, hello, hello.
Hello.
It's fantastic to see you. Thank you so much for having us.
No, it's a pleasure. So welcome to my studio, which I've had an enormous tidy up in, because normally, because it's ceramics, the place is filthy dirty. There's so much dust, and I bring in all sorts of other things that cause dust as well. So you've met me on a good day. It is really tidy in here. I've also had to shut out the sun because, as Alison was saying, it's the most glorious weather. We've got the most incredible sunshine, and at this time of day, it's now sort of late afternoon, it comes right into the studio, so I've had to shut it out. So I just wanted to show you where I live, really, before I start talking about what I do. And because it's impossible for me to get down onto the beach and have any reception, I thought I'd show you a photo of the view from my terrace, which is what you're seeing now. That is looking out. So when Isabel showed you a map of the Southwest Peninsula, there's a town which is the sort of county town of Cornwall, which is called Truro, and we are virtually due south of Truro. And that was a photo taken a little while ago of boats at anchor in the bay below us. That's the view from my kitchen. But if I had that view from my studio, I'd never do any work. So
I'm just going to share again the screen with the map. Hang on, because I'd like to. So here we are. So Truro is right here.
Alison is east of Plymouth, heading towards Exeter, but not as far as Exeter. Whereas I'm on the coast, virtually south of Truro. Yeah, a little bit right of that.
Okay, so I'm just going to flip through the images. Here we are. This is the second image of your coastline. So
that's my beach, and that's one of the closest beaches to me. It's at low tide there, so you've got quite a lot of rock at the bottom of it. I can walk to that from my house. I go down there on a very regular basis, looking across the water to Lucy, who you're going to meet later on. And it's fascinating. Not only are there large numbers of rocks on there that have the most incredible patterns on them, but the back of the beach is a bit of a low cliff, very soft material. And so that's one of the rocks that is just lying about. Well, they're not lying about, they're actually part of the beach. They're part of the structure of the ground there. And they're important to me. I feel really grounded by geology. It just fascinates me that you can get so many different textures and the powers that have gone into creating all that, you know, the lines, the different colors, the creatures that live on it, the strength in them. It's something that I find really quite important, really grounding. And I've spent my entire adult life moving about every 2 years. And so having a place which is home, which matters to me and which I've been trapped in, it's like being trapped in paradise. It's been wonderful for the last few, 18 months.
But you are
there the back of the cliff, where, can we just have another look at that slide, Isabel?
Of course.
So
This
that's
one?
the back of that cliff. No, the other one. That's it. That's the back of the cliff on that beach. And it's really where I get an awful lot of inspiration. My work is about the value, the fragility, the beauty of the landscape, especially my landscape, but anybody's landscape really is home and is special to them. And so what I do is I take a little bit of material from something like that cliff, and then I take it home. And having got it home, I will then work with it. And if we go back to my studio, I'll show you what I do. So, like
before we, Bridgette, before we get to that, I just want to share, your practice is fairly recent. I mean, you were not a professional ceramicist for your whole life. Can you, and you just hinted that you were moving every 2 years. Just give us a little bit of your life story here. It's an interesting story.
I've been married 41 years to somebody who's been in the army for most of that time. And the army moves you a lot. And every time we moved, it was, first of all, sort the children out. I have 2 children. Secondly, sort the house out. Thirdly, find something to do. And I trained as a teacher. And so I ended up teaching wherever we've been. But because you're trying to get a job slightly last minute, you end up taking what you can get. So I've taught children aged 5 all the way up to age 16. I've taught English, maths, science, history, geography, PE, can't remember, but quite a few other things. But I've ended up an awful lot teaching the classes that other people didn't want to teach. The kids that were disaffected or struggling or not very inspirational, but I actually found them really good fun to be with and actually very inspirational as well. So then I sort of specialized in children with dyslexia, children who were just disaffected, and that took up a lot of the next few years. Suddenly realized that I was exhausted by it. My children were both earning more than I was, and I didn't want to do it anymore. So I went off and did a foundation art course. During the foundation art course, one of the options was ceramics. And once I got my hands into the clay, I just couldn't take them out again. It's just the most astonishing material because it's so malleable, and yet you fire it and it becomes something so permanent. And that's become a bit of an obsession, really.
I can see that.
it comes, I'm sorry, it just comes through everything I do is this. And then I discovered porcelain, which is what I wanted to show you, because porcelain is, as Alison was saying, a very special substance. So let me just get a small piece out.
Where does one buy porcelain? I mean, there are suppliers online. You just, how do you do that?
Well, I've been buying it online recently. Yes, there are a number of sort of pottery suppliers that you can go to, and they will let you have some. But it's white. It's very white, very squashy, and it has, as Alison was saying earlier, it has this connotation of beauty and fragility, and it's also quite expensive because it's not ordinary clay. It's actually a mix of things. So it took a long time for people to find the recipe. The Chinese had it a long time ago, but they wouldn't share it with anybody. And so I think it was in the 17th, 18th century, the Cornish worked out how to get it like this. And so it's quite a Cornish thing anyway. But it has this idea in it of beauty and of value, and that's why I use it. Because the next thing I do to it is to take, so this is the material from the back of that cliff, which I collected yesterday. I've mixed it with a bit of water, so it's become really gloopy. And I take this, which looks like sort of revolting, rubbishy mud, and I mix it onto this wonderful, white, clear, pristine porcelain. And that's the start of every piece that I make. So I've got no idea when I do this how a piece is going to come out. And I say, you know, opening my kiln is a little bit like, well, it's either Christmas or it's Armageddon. Sometimes you get the most wonderful things coming out. Sometimes you get an absolute disaster. But by mixing, I'm only doing a tiny bit, normally I would use really quite a big bit. By mixing these two materials together, one which everybody knows talks of value and beauty, and the other one which talks of the value and the beauty of landscape, is exciting, really exciting, and you never know what you're going to get. So that's the sort of thing that I do. And then, having mixed it a bit like that, I mean, I'm going to do this quite quickly because otherwise you're going to get a little bored with me rattling on. I would roll it out. And then I might cut into it. And you get some sort of idea of the sorts of patterns that you might end up with. If I then roll that with a rolling pin. So I don't throw things on a wheel because you can't do anything so original and exciting. So I'd roll it out a little bit. But before I've rolled it all the way, I might score into it a couple of times. I'm not sure how much of this you're seeing. Isabel, is this working?
Yes, it is. No, we can see really well. And
Great.
we actually have Edie is saying that it's very similar to what she does with dough when marbling.
Oh, really? It's not marbling though, because marbling is much more sort of predictable. But you get, it's not really working very well. I'll see if I can do a better bit. So you end up with quite a thin piece.
Yeah.
With some quite interesting patterns. They're probably not the patterns that you're going to end up with, because the next thing that happens is, having rolled it all out, I put it in a mold. And
do you make your own mold?
I do, yes. So this went into a mold yesterday. I'm hoping it'll come out. This is a little crucible. Lucy and I are working on a project together at the moment based on crucibles. And crucibles down in Cornwall are quite important things. Cornish mining is a big thing and has been for centuries. And they're used to take small quantities of the rock with the metals in it to see whether the metal was worth extracting. And so they would put it into a crucible smaller than this, but this is going to shrink in the kiln anyway. And they would find out the value, it's called assaying, find out the value of the metal within the ore. And the Cornish developed a way of creating crucibles that were very, very heat resistant, which of course they need to be, because you're going to heat them up with charcoal or something to extract the metal from them. And so the crucible is a kind of Cornish thing as well. So I'll take that shape, which is now what's called leather hard.
Sorry to interrupt. Before we go further, can you just confirm what a crucible is?
It's a tiny little pot which will sit over a flame in a bit like a tripod, sit like that with a flame underneath it, and you would put into that a mix of the metal ore, so that would be the rock containing the metal, mixed with charcoal, and as you heat it up, there'll be a chemical reaction, and the metal will come out from the rock, so that you can see whether you've got, the Cornish were very well known for tin mining and copper mining and sometimes silver mining, but you would extract that in the rock, you put it in here, and you'd see how much metal you would get out from the piece of rock that you, crushed rock that you'd put in with the charcoal. And it's called a crucible. Why? I've no idea why. But it's that, generally that sort of shape, and the Cornish ones tend to be a sort of a triangular cross section.
Mm-hmm.
So that's now what's called leather hard. It feels cold, although probably not as cold as it should because the weather's too good. But I can work it, and I can scrape it to remove some of the sort of, inevitably, because the mud that I'm putting in is really hard to keep off my hands. It gets all over the clay, and I don't want it everywhere. I want to show the porcelain. I want the white to come through. So I can work into this, making the walls thinner, making the whole piece more fragile, altering the shape slightly, and coming up with something which has colour coming through it from the clay that I've dug up. And also, it's sort of, I want it to remind me of the strata in the rocks, the different colours in the rocks. But until I take it out of the kiln and polish it for the last time, I don't actually know what it's going to look like. But if you see, that's a piece where I haven't worked it. And that's a piece where I have. So you're beginning to get these thinner, more refined lines coming through.
We can see it well. And we have a question from Ricky. She wants to know if the material that you add to the porcelain, does that create weakness in the structure of the finished product?
Can do. It's, I mean, if it's going to present a weakness, it will do it in the kiln. And so when I open the kiln, it's either blown up or it's fine, because once it's fired, there's not a huge amount. I mean, you saw the amount that I put into that little piece. The porcelain will hold it together. Porcelain is really strong. So if it's fired and come through okay, it won't be weak.
Right.
If it's blown up, it goes in the bin. And that's a sadness, because the trouble with ceramics is they stick around for centuries. And that I find, I want to find a use for the pieces that are wasted, because I can't do anything else with them ceramically. They're just, a mosaic would be the only thing.
Right.
So that's the next stage. Having done that, the next thing I would do, this is actually a different one. Sometimes I put coloured clays into a piece, but I'd scrape off anything that was hiding the strata. I don't know whether you can see that coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And then I take a stone, and this stone is very special to me because I did an exhibition in Norfolk, which is the other side of England. It's on the east coast. And it's a completely different landscape, but I was still doing it on the coast, and they have an awful lot of chalk, and they get flint appearing in the chalk. And flint is quite a glassy stone. And I picked up this stone, and I've been using it ever since that exhibition to do what's called burnishing, which is where you take, now I'm really not sure whether this is going to work on Zoom, but you take the clay, which is now quite dry, and you polish it, and you do it for ages and ages and ages. And I think if I just hold it a bit closer and hold it in the light, it sort of darkens and shines, and you begin to get, you see a bit of a shine coming there.
Mm-hmm.
You begin to get a feel for how special it's going to be when it's fired.
So when you do these very repetitive movements and stages in your practice, do you listen to music, or do you just like quiet, or do you, what's the
I listen to music. I have Classic FM, which is a UK station, but I think you can get it worldwide on internet. So it's classical music, but it's sort of pop classics. I'm not into really, really serious classical music, and that I love. That keeps me very happy, and it's kind of, yes, you're right. There's a lot of repetition, a lot of repetitive movement. A bit like, you know, the scraping is very repetitive, the polishing is very repetitive, meditative, and it's actually quite kind of reassuring, comforting. I've really enjoyed that in the last few months, I can tell you.
I'm sure. So once you put the burnishing, then what happens?
Then it goes in the kiln, and it's fired once. And having been fired once, it comes out looking, I feel I'm doing one of Alison's Blue Peter demonstrations here. Here's one I did earlier. This is very pale. I don't know, I think it's got grit from a beach down in Devon, a place called Salcombe. It's for a gallery in Salcombe, and so this has been fired once. You can see that the porcelain has become very, very white now. It's quite hard, but it's quite fragile as well. If I was to push this too hard, I would break it. At the moment, the colours in it are dull. There's nothing very exciting about them, but they will come out later, I hope. The inside looks very white, and that's because that's got a glaze on it. So it would be functional. If somebody wanted to use it as a, I mean, you wouldn't use it as a soup bowl. It's got a rough edge, and I like the rough edge. I like the idea that it's not perfect. They're not perfect. And so you wouldn't use it for that, but you might put, I don't know, crisps or something like that into it if you were at a party, or you might just put it on the side and enjoy it. But I'd like to glaze it. And the other reason I like to glaze it is because I'm not going to glaze the outside, and I want the glaze will react with the minerals in the soil that I've put in, and depending on what minerals are in that soil, you get different colours, and that's quite exciting. So that's the inside, and then it goes back in the kiln, and it's high fired, so it goes up to 1220 centigrade. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's hot.
It's very hot.
It's very hot. At which point the glaze becomes glassy. The clay will, what's called vitrify, will become glassy, and you end up with the finished object. Well, the nearly finished object. So something a bit like that. The colours have come out much more.
So I have two questions about these pieces. So Michelle wanted to know earlier if these pieces behind you have been burnished. And so the pieces that you have behind you are just the finished product of all the process you've showed us.
Yes, they are. But they've had an extra process. So after they come out of the high firing, then because I haven't glazed the outside, I haven't got anything in the studio at the moment that hasn't had the final process. But the final process is to polish them with a wet diamond polishing machine. It's a horrible job. We built the greenhouse not for our tomatoes, but for polishing, because the water spouts out of the middle of this circular pad that's rotating rapidly, covered in tiny little diamonds, and it takes off the surface, and then you go through various different grades. So you start with 50 diamonds per square millimeter, I think it is, and it goes up to 3,000, finer and finer and finer, like sanding, but you get a very, very smooth finish, which isn't glazed, so your hands are literally on the clay, and I feel that's really important. It's also a very unusual thing to do with clay, and I love it. Absolutely love the result.
And then you wax it.
And then I wax it just to give it a little bit more shine. So that's just a beeswax polish, rub it in, polish it with a rotary sort of buffer like you'd use on your car, I suppose.
Right.
And that's the finished piece.
Right. So we have, which is absolutely glorious. And maybe you can show us some of the other pieces that have all these different patterns and the different shape. I want to share that, you know, as I said at the beginning, we're going to see how we can bring our roots in through the work and connect with the makers. So I commissioned a couple of pieces from Bridgette, because like Bridgette, we have traveled and moved every 4 or 5 years for a couple of decades. And our children, actually, if you ask them where they are from, where they think they are from, they'll tell you that they're not quite sure. But the house where we are now, we elected it to be the family home. So I went to our beach because we live on the lake, and I collected some soil, which is on its way to Bridgette. And I will give the kids each a piece. So they will have a piece from their roots, and no matter where they live in the world, they'll have something from their, you know, from their family home. And I think that it's one of these magical possibilities of craft and of connecting with the makers themselves. It's that whole world of connection, but commissioning, that results in surrounding ourselves with objects that are meaningful rather than, you know, with stuff. And it, you know, we can do it with Alison. We have things around us. I'm sure that if we send Alison a couple of our stuff, she'll make magic with it. And we're going to see that it's also possible with Lucy, and in a different way with Helen. So let's go back to you, Bridgette, and show us maybe all the pieces that you have at the back there.
Well, on that subject, I mean, commissions is a big part of what I do. So I think possibly the first one was actually, I took some soil from, or I was handed some soil from the bench under which a young man had proposed. And it was turned into a present from him to her to sort of commemorate their getting engaged. That was quite special. And I've also done them for people who are moving out of a house that they've lived in for years and years and years, and they want a part of that house to come with them. Or they've been putting an extension on a house and they want to recognize the house. So they'll take some soil from the foundations that they're digging and put that into a piece. And it's just such a joy to do things that have such an association with somebody's home or some special place. So this piece,
it's a very different approach to acquiring work. I think that you know, we often acquire something because we see it, it's beautiful, and we want it on our shelf. And I don't know if it's a question of philosophy or age or as we go along, but I mean, commissioning something takes time, and we're not going to get the instant gratification. But I think that the depth of the meaning of the piece is much more ingrained, and we hang on to it. So
I think it's also about the anticipation. You know, I try to engage quite a lot with a client and send them photos and ask them whether they're happy with a particular shape or whether they want me to build the sides up a bit more, and I'll send them photos of the different stages so they know what's going on. And it's, so you may not get it tomorrow, you may not be able to walk out of a shop with it, but what you get, you've learnt over a period of maybe a couple of months to know, and I think that's quite special.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I actually had to deliver some work to a gallery this morning because they'd run out. So people do also buy work, you know, because they like it, because it's pretty.
Oh, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, nothing
I think
at all.
it's just a different way to populate our homes with objects that are meaningful. And I don't know, I mean, what the audience think, but I saw again another, you know, they say buy less than buy better.
Yes.
I mean, if we think about it, it's just a marketing ploy, because they just want you to buy, you know, yet another pair of jeans, and they want you to believe that it's going to last you 20 years, and therefore you won't buy another pair of jeans for 20 years. It just ain't true. You know, and that appropriation of the phrase that for me really belongs to craft, buy less than buy better, requires a fundamental change of thinking. And it's not by putting it on a billboard that it's, you know, that is complete appropriation, I think, and it drives me a little crazy.
You and me both. And yes, and buy to last as well. Buy things that, you know, you can hand to the next generation, which you can with these.
Yeah.
I mean, would you like to see some of the other shapes?
Yes, absolutely. We'd love to.
So this is, if I put it there, you can see it against the plain background. This is actually using clay from Ourika Valley in Morocco, where I was for 2 weeks before we went into lockdown. And I went up into the Ourika Valley, which is really quite famous for its pottery. And I met a lovely man in one of the pottery sort of workshops there, and he gave me some of his clay, and I put it into a number of pieces, and it's great. He only fires it up to about, I think, about 1100, whereas I'm firing it up to 1220, and you can see how it's blistered in places. You get these fabulous craters where the color comes through, and then you get other areas where, and when it comes out of the kiln, it's actually quite textured, but the polishing takes all that off. So that's that one. But then talking about that, where's it gone? Can't see it now. So this is using mining waste from the Cornish mines. And I love making these jars. They're actually really complicated to make, but I just love that shape. I love that you can sort of hold it, cuddle it almost, but it sits nicely on a shelf, and it's got this amazing colors all through it. You never quite know what you're going to get. These were quite pale when they went into the kiln, and they're now really dark. And here's where I've drawn into the clay before I actually rolled it really thin. So that's another shape. And I do them.
Can I ask you a question from someone who knows nothing about ceramic? What happens if I was to put a piece of ceramic in my oven instead of in a kiln? Would it explode? It's just not high enough, or what would happen?
You wouldn't get hot enough.
It doesn't get hot enough.
No, I think your oven will go up to 200 centigrade, 220 centigrade, whereas I'm going up to 1200.
Yeah.
1220. So it would get hot, but it wouldn't, that would be it. When it's in the kiln, if you look through the spy hole, it's actually red, if not yellow. It gets so hot, it sort of shimmers.
Right.
So I showed you one earlier, which was, I said, was coloured clays instead. And this is one I've made for actually the same gallery down in Salcombe, where I've used coloured, sort of mixed in some proprietary colours that I've got from a ceramic supplier. And they wanted some that were sort of sea colours, because they're right on the coast as well. Most of Devon and Cornwall is on a coast somewhere. So that's another jar that I've made for them. The little bowl, I mean, that's how much they shrink. That's the same size as the little one that I showed you earlier, which had only been fired once. But it's, you know, by the time it's shrunk in the kiln, it shrinks by about 20%. It's a good size for, you know, or tomatoes if you want, or just put on your top of your piano or wherever. I think they're just a lovely shape, these ones. This one has got, I think that's also for Sulcombe, actually. I've got quite a lot of the Sulcombe ones here at the moment because I haven't managed to get down to deliver them.
Is it clear glaze inside?
Yes. Yes, it's a clear glaze, which sort of, if you put it on quite thick, it pools a bit sort of glassy, and so you've got quite a nice glassy finish on the inside, and then the polish on the outside.
It's incredible.
What else have I got here? Oh, that's another shape that I quite like making, which is, it's a sort of oval cross section. Sorry, but I like the strata in this one. Really reminds me of rock forms.
It's fantastic. Yeah. Really fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Again, I just want to, we had quite a few questions for you in the chat box, but maybe someone wants to unmute herself and ask a direct question. I will be sharing, obviously, everybody's contact. Michelle, did you have a question?
Just a quick one. Bridgette, your work is beautiful. And the last piece that you held up, when you're creating that shape, you're rolling out your porcelain, and then how do you assemble and create that shape? So because I know that that's not easy to do, and to hold that shape, and you know.
So I roll a big long flat sheet, and then I'll just show you. Bear with me 1 second.
Do you do ceramic, Michelle?
I'll say I play with ceramic, but I love it.
They sell these in pet shops in UK for gerbils to hide in.
Oh.
They're cardboard. They're good, really solid cardboard, and I've got some sort of different diameters. I can roll the clay round that to build a cylinder, and then when it gets a little bit drier, I can take the mold out and shape it into the oval. You've got to get it right.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Right. It's not easy, and the seam is quite hard. If you so where the join is, it's really difficult to hide that seam completely.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I should have, thank you so much, Bridgette. It really was fascinating, and I have to say I'm waiting for Christmas now to see those pieces. I should have introduced Michelle, or reminded you of Michelle. Those of you who followed the conversation we did for Crafted Vancouver, Michelle had a conversation with Nicholas Lees, wasn't it? Who is an incredible ceramicist too. And we talked about your processes, but also about the what goes into your making. And you are a textile artist making hook pieces, and that are extraordinary. So it's really lovely. I always love it when we have makers and artists who join our conversation. Thank you so much, Bridgette. Fantastic, really, what a pleasure. And we're now going to Lucy. Let me put the spotlight on Lucy. Hi, Lucy, how are you?
Hi, very well, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you. So
Good.
are you going to take us to your garden and your studio before we come back to see your...
All being well.
Oh, I'm sure it will be fine.
So can you see that okay?
Absolutely.
Fab. Anywhere between I'm going to give you 70 and 100 years old. And they're just a real joy for me to have in my garden. We have a bird bath which welcomes a lot of wildlife in. The top of the bird bath was taken, quarried from the quarry that we can see from our front door, and the post that it's on came from one of the old pillars out of Falmouth Harbour, which floated across to Milo Creek, which is just around the coast. So that's another nice thing to have in the garden. But you can see the size of these astonishing tree trunks. There's my hand, just to give you an idea. And this is my studio, which is nestled underneath the trees and has some lovely sunshine on it at the minute. My dad and my husband are currently building me an extension, so you get to see it in its original format. But this is where I make. It's quite small, but the techniques that I use are techniques of hammering, planning the marks, and using a hand saw. So I use this little fret saw for doing all of the cutting out. So the lichen brooches, which you will have seen, which are very carefully cut out of sheet metal, brass or copper. I'll just show you one of those. So the backs are hand cut. Sorry if that's not focusing too well.
No, we can see well, yes.
Yeah, great. So those are cut by hand out of sheet metal, and they are a tracing of the pieces of lichen which I find on the ground, usually when I'm out walking, but sometimes we get nice pieces fall out of the trees here as well. So those are actual pieces of real lichen, and they're held in by little metal claws which you can just see. So when the piece does finally disintegrate, I mean this one I'm holding now is 2 years old, so it's still in good condition. But when they do break down, you can unwrap the little claws on the back and put your own treasures in that you found, or send it back to me and I'll replace it with something for you. They have silver pins on the back which hold them in place onto your scarf or your jacket and make quite a unique talking point. I suppose a bit the same way as Ali's work. They're just quite unusual, and I think people are interested by them because they maybe haven't seen anything or thought about jewellery in that kind of way before. We kind of think of jewellery as quite a traditional gold and silver and semi-precious or precious stones, which is great, and I work a lot with that as well. But sometimes it's quite nice to challenge that thought. These are some of the bits and pieces that I collect. The light is a bit full on at the minute because we've got this glorious sunny day. I'm not complaining, but there's lichens and pieces of seaweed and little twigs that I've collected. One of my granddad's old workshop hammers there, which I use for texturing my materials, and a little shelf of things found on the beach, usually the beach down the road from our house, which is called Flushing. And some of that lovely monofilament that Ali was talking about before as well.
Do you apply any treatment to the lichen or the algae or whatever natural element you use in your jewellery?
No, I don't. They're left just as they are. I file the ends down at the twigs so they're not sharp. But no, they are just natural and dried, just as they would be if you found them and took them home with you to your to your mantelpiece or your little pot. There's a few more up here. They're all different shapes and sizes. And I've got some inside to show you in better detail when I get back inside. This is my soldering area. So again, quite simple. I have these are heat blocks. So you do your soldering onto these, which means they take the heat out. So you're not burning anything. And then you quench into some water. And then this little pot here has got jeweler's pickle in it, which is a kind of acid. And that removes any fire scale. So that blackened, oxidized look that you get, that takes that away. And then it leaves you with quite a white metal surface, which you then polish back. And over here, I've got some more treasures. This is a little spot here where I keep work that's finished. So this is one of my, this is an older piece of work. This is a reticulated silver cuff. So this started out life as a piece of sheet silver, and using heat and, sorry, that's the door, it's very windy. Putting that into the acid bath, you get these wonderful forms which just occur naturally. You can't recreate them identically, so each piece is completely unique. I make these to order. I don't just have them in stock, but they are just really lovely, very reminiscent of those rock forms that Bridgette uses, and the seascapes where you'll see all of us talking about those in our work. There's another little brooch here where you can see quite well the details in the lichens, that lovely little cup shapes, beautiful yellows. This one's on copper. You can see the file marks in the back there. And as the copper and the brass age, they'll take on their own patination as well. So they'll become things of beauty in their own right, as well as with the lichens on them.
How did you get to mix these natural elements and jewelry? What was the inspiration?
Shall I walk you around the garden and I'll chat to you about that while I'm walking? Because the view in here is not so wonderful, but the view out here is really lovely. So lichens inspired me from the get-go with my work. I love the forms and the shapes and the beautiful, delicate details, and that idea of them being living beings which rely on each other to form a cohesive whole. So that symbiosis I find really interesting. And the brooches came about from a project I was doing with the Precious Collective, which is a jewellery collective which looks to challenge the concepts of what jewellery is and what's precious and what people deem to be precious. So that, you know, the gold and silver and stones that I was talking about, that's it sort of challenges those concepts and says, you know, hey, what about all these other things that we have in our environment that we treasure, that we love, like the monofilament that Ali was using and the bits that she's finding, and the mud that Bridgette's putting into her porcelain. You know, these things are really beautiful in their own right, and they're precious as well in that they're a resource. And I think that that's just come more and more through my work. To the piece of work that I'm looking at the moment is a new range called Talisman, and that's all about red list species, which are, but I'm assuming you have a similar kind of thing in Canada. It's where species are endangered and their numbers have dropped quite significantly. We have a real problem here with farming, and the chemicals and the methods of farming have caused our wildlife to diminish, in some cases by 96–97%, with some species of birds and wildflowers just nearly on the brink of extinction. So the Talisman range aims to call those names to mind, and I etch them into the surface of silver and brass and make brooches and bangles and rings and pieces that you can hold close to your body and be reminded of those things and how important they are. Just found this lovely little piece of twig and lichen in the garden. Yeah, I think I'm becoming much more political in terms of the message that I want to try and get across with my work, while still making it wearable and something you'll treasure. I want it to be something that will hold value for another reason as well, and that it reminds you of those really precious things in our environment that need taking care of, need looking after. So this is the meadow that I was talking about, and I think when I showed it to you originally, Isabel, it was much more full of oxeye daisies than it is now. But now we've got things like mallow coming through, which weren't there before, which is really beautiful. I also have orange bird's foot trefoil, which is not very common and found mostly only in Cornwall. This is the yellow version, which is much more common.
Do you plant the meadow every year, or is it a fully natural wild meadow?
No, it's completely naturalized. Most of this stuff has come up all by itself. We have only gone quite so far with the meadow this year. Usually we leave this patch that you can see around here. This is the bit that we have always had as meadow, but we've just let the whole garden go this year, and it's been really wonderful. We've got acanthus growing over there, which come every year. We call them bear's breeches. And then just wandering back up the garden, it's my studio friend. You can see my studio nestled under the trees with its extension on the back, which is going to be lovely because it will have a nice view down the valley.
Do you show at galleries, and do you produce collections that are easily available, or is like Alison, everything you do a one-off and cannot be reproduced?
I have ranges which are available on my website, and everything is there to see with prices. I do sell through galleries. They're all in the UK at the moment. I did show some work in Toronto a couple of years ago with the British export program. And if you want to commission particular pieces, so if you wanted to send me something you found, like a piece of lichen or a particular piece of wood that you love, a pebble that you love, then I can make a back for that, turn it into a brooch for you as well. So you can carry that with you and pin it to your clothes or to your scarf, or even gift it if it's something that you really treasure in a place that's got really happy memories because of somebody that you care about, that you spent time in that place with. So I guess it's sort of similar to Bridgette's work and Ali's work in that sense, that it's recalling place and it's recalling the people that you love spending time with in those places as well.
Mm-hmm. Can we go back to your house and have a look at some of your?
Of course.
I'm interested to see that. And I know that we are a little bit ahead of time. So what I would like to suggest is that we have a look at Lucy's jewelry, and then maybe we can take a 5-minute break if you want to, because we've been on the call for almost an hour and a half. We've been traveling, and sometimes we just need a break. So let's look at Lucy's collection, and then we'll take a 5 minutes break. Are you still?
So the necklace that I'm wearing at the moment, have you got me?
Yeah.
Have a look. You got me okay?
No, we have no image.
Okay. I've just moved over to Wi-Fi. Is that any better?
That's good, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I've laid out some work for you to have a look at. These are 3 of the brooches that we were discussing earlier. This middle one, I have some lovely images of the making process. I don't know whether they actually got to you, Isabel, or not. I didn't check. So this one is cut from copper, but instead of polishing the copper up, I've left it. And it's got lovely red and brown tones through it where it's been heated. And it's starting to get that lovely verdigris on this end as well. There's that one, and then there's the polished copper. This piece has actually had some treatment to it. I tried it with 5-star, which actually works surprisingly well. It's a wood hardener that you use on houses. It does change the colour of the lichens a little bit, so that's a bit of a one-off. I probably won't do that again because it makes them slightly shiny as well. And this piece is on brass.
Have you tried hairspray on the on the?
No, I haven't actually.
And I use the hairspray when I do dry flowers. And
okay, I'll give that a go. These earrings are part of a synthesis range, and this particular design was made for Milan Jewellery Week, which I was a part of Artistar. So that was really exciting. The necklace that I'm wearing and these earrings went together. So there's some 18-karat gold in those and sterling silver. I use a lot of touches of gold in my work, which is my way of expressing that connection with nature and the importance of nature. So those have got little gold settings around a blue London blue topaz. Here you can see the way that I bring those lichen details into my designs, and these have a really lovely movement to them when they're worn. They're quite elegant, those, and very light as well. So customers often ask if they're really heavy because they're quite big, but they're not. I have some chains here as well.
It's interesting. We can really see the. I hadn't seen such your extensive collection before, and we can really get the connection with the nature now that we have seen the lichen and your garden and understand. It's really interesting.
That's good. I'm glad you can. It's nice. I think studios are such private spaces, and especially when they're your home, not many people get to see my studio because I live here. So it's quite a private spot, I guess. These ones, so Bridgette was wearing a necklace which her husband bought her, which I made for their wedding anniversary, but it was a version of these earrings, which are my Mylor earrings. Mylor is a beach around the corner, and the coastline is made up of all these striations of rocks, and above the tide line, the rocks are black and covered with this beautiful gold lichen, which is a kind of xanthorrhea. So the Mylor range is coming from that inspiration, and the ring that I'm wearing is also from that as well, with a quite a large Peruvian blue opal, which looks a bit like rock pools. So that combination of coastline and rock pools there is one that I really like that. I like the black and the silver and the gold in those. And then this is the Talisman range, which is, I'm sorry if you can't see this very well, but there's much better photographs of it on my website if you want to have a look at that. This is etched with the names of different lichens which are found in Cornwall, and then the gold seam, again, just that question of what do you find precious comes through in that as well. So there's a whole range of those, and you can have them in birds, lichens, trees, wildflowers, and if you've got particular things that you have in Canada that are endangered and you would like those etching, I can do that for you as well. This is an oxidized version of the same thing. So you can really see how those letters stand out against the oxidized surface. And actually, I've just made this today. This is brand new, and you guys will be the first to see this. So I took the notion of the endangered species and plant tags. So we all use plant tags in our gardens. So I've etched onto the plant tags the names of endangered wildflowers and turned them into cuffs.
Oh, that's a great idea.
So you get that texture, but then when you look more closely, which I hope everyone will do, is to look more closely at their surroundings and see what's there. You can see the names of all these things.
That's very clever.
So yeah, that's the first one, and it's not even been photographed. It's not my website yet, but I thought you guys might like to see it because it's a first.
Well, thank you for giving us the exclusivity. If there are questions for Lucy, do let me know. Raise your hand and mute yourself. We've lost the image again at Lucy.
Can you hear me again?
Yes. Oh, here you are.
Better?
Yes.
I wanted to show you this. This is something that Bridgette and I have been working on. So this is what Bridgette's porcelain crucibles, and this is a mock-up for it. But the silver band around the top is going to be etched with the names of lichens, Cornish lichens, and then these are actual pieces of lichens which have been found on the forest floor in the woods near where Bridgette and I live. And they're going to be a series of 15 vessels, which we're hoping to produce for a show. But they are concept stage. But again, I thought you would like to see them because it really shows that link and how we can each sort of share and work together to create things that are really interesting and different and combine our skills to create really beautiful. I think they're beautiful. I'm really excited about this.
So we'll just wait for Diana, and then I see that Alison is at home. So Alison, what is the name of your village?
I live between Cotley and Wilmington in a little valley. And it is beautiful. I've got alpacas that I can see from my kitchen window, and in the winter there's horses down there, and there's loads of sheep and there's loads of cows, and I don't mind that because, you know, this is country living, and that's why we came to Devon. But also we're only 20 minutes from the sea, and the sea has always been really important. I used to live in London, and we moved down to the Dorset coast in 2000 because I wanted to live by the sea, because my childhood memories of the best holidays were the ones that my grandparents, they had a farm up on the Essex coast, which was very cold, and the sea is brown, but down here the sea is blue, it's turquoise, it's fabulous. So yeah,
let's have a look at. Let's have a look. I can see a sculpture and I can see a necklace. So we've got 10-15 minutes with you to have a look at your collection and really understand, you know, what it is that you do.
Oh yeah. So this is one of my wire containers with some porcelain fish in them that just sort of hang around really. until I remember, oh yeah, I could put that in for a show, couldn't I? Yeah. So I want to
porcelain fish. I just find it fascinating.
Yeah. There you go.
All right. So this is the marking. You use the objects that you find on the beach to do this kind of marking. Is that how it would have been done?
Yeah, but I made these in first lockdown when we were not allowed to drive anywhere. So I thought, how can I make some bones? I kind of want to get fish scales, but that's not really going to work. So when I walk the dog, we pass loads of ferns on the road, and so these are ferns. So it looks like a kind of like an inside out fish because these are fish bones.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was my thinking. And then this is a plastic sushi mat for making sushi.
And how do you get the color in? Do you paint?
Don't invite me round, because I'll be eyeing up things. Oh, I could use that. Oh, and actually these are stuffed with the clippings from the alpacas next door.
All right.
Because they can't use it, they can't sell it. So the neighbour, John and Pete, said, any use? I thought, well, I thought I might one day spin it. But in the meantime, I'm stuffing fish with them.
Do you have your own kiln?
Yes, yeah. I've got an eco kiln, which is I try to look after the environment as much as I can. So that's why I try and recycle as much as I can, and to not use new materials, which I already said. But the eco kiln, yes, I'm firing and using a lot of energy, but I try to do a single firing sometimes, or it's got extra insulation, so that it doesn't use so much energy going up to full temperature.
Right. Yeah. So you've got some things ready for us.
I do. Look what I found.
Oh, nice.
So that's an ammonite that I found down on the beach, and I used as the texture for these beads, porcelain beads.
Mm-hmm.
And these are a new venture for me, because the beads that I took to collect in Somerset House in London a couple of years ago were huge. These ones you can wear. You can actually wear these, and they're not heavy at all. Right. So this one is, can you see what it is? It's a shell.
Right.
So, yeah. So I use the shells to texture the porcelain, and then I tend to use probably about 4 or 5 different glazes on top. So yeah, this has probably got 5 or 6, and it's very, let me show you yeah, texture is really important to me, and I think it's important when you're wearing something on you, because when you're sitting in a meeting, or you're always fiddling with well, it might just be me, you touch your jewellery, you touch what you're wearing, you touch you need something soft and I don't know what yeah, I'm very affected by touch and how it feels, whether it's hot or cold or scratchy or smooth. So these textures I've got on these, this is very sort of volcanic.
Right.
And it's got semi-matte glaze, and it'll have a shiny glaze on there. And you just want to sit there and rub it. On either side are Egyptian paste beads, which I make. And those are old, ancient 2,000-year-old recipes. That's how the Egyptians made their beads. And they're often, if you've been to the British Museum, they're often turquoise. That's because they use copper, which is what I use. And of course, completely unique. You can't, these are all one-offs. And also the silver links that I've made, which is a new skill for me. Always trying to collect new techniques and skills. That's using eco silver. So that's reclaimed silver that is sold in rods. So I just sort of bash it about.
So did you start as a ceramicist and then went into jewelry, or what has been your path?
I wanted to be a fashion designer, really did. Went to art school, did my art foundation, and saw the people doing fashion. I thought, I can't spend 3 years with people like that, they're awful. So I swapped to ceramics, because I thought, hey, ceramics is normal, you know, they're They're completely normal people doing ceramics. So I went to Camberwell School of Art down in South London, not far from Blackheath. Who was it in Blackheath?
Sarah was. Yeah,
that's right, Sarah. And had a fantastic time. It was the tutors there were fantastic, really good. And my final show featured fish and birds, and I had no idea that those motifs, fish and birds, would just follow me all, 40 odd years later. Difficult to get away from them. So about 5 years ago, I took a sabbatical, left my job as a library manager, and did a master's at Bath. Nice place to do it. Beautiful city. And wanted to do textiles. Got accepted for textiles, spent 2 terms. I go, actually, I think it's ceramics I need to be. So I went down to ceramics, but I was also going into the metalwork workshop because I discovered their waste bins, and you could get all sorts of treasures in their waste bins, and sort of pulling them out, going, oh, what can I use this for? So yeah, it's very much a wabi-sabi technique and ethos. It's celebrating the imperfect, the discarded, seeing the potential in something that other people might just dismiss. That's quite important for me.
Oh, it's fantastic. I think it's a wonderful ethos. Before we go to, I see that Helen has joined us. Any questions for Alison, or you can always get in touch with her later on. Thank you so much, Alison, for welcoming us in your home, on your beach, and sharing everything with us. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I lost you then. We're in Newquay. We're situated on the cliff top of Fistral Beach, which is a world-renowned surfing beach that they have amazing surfing contests here. So we're just kind of sat on one of the beaches of Newquay. We've pretty much got about 10 or 11 that I can walk to from my home, and they all have their own unique kind of personas. They're all very different. So this beach today, if we show you, we'll just give you a pan view and take you round. So we're going across to the actual beach of Fistral. So it's not very impressive for surf today, but normally it's absolutely pounding here. So it can be quite an amazing environment to be within. And a lot of my we'll bring you back around now. A lot of my original vessels started out as a shoreline collection, which is when it's all about that breaking wave as it comes down and it crashes, and you get all these bubbles that come right up to the surface, and you kind of get, there's a V that forms when the wave breaks. So this V comes in, and at the end, when you're looking down from the cliff top, all you see are these like gaudy shapes and forms. And they just change constantly, but they're just so beautiful and organic to look at. So it's just amazing. I'm sorry, I get a bit carried away with this sort of thing. Where I live is just absolutely stunning. I've got so much choice and so much freedom, and I'm just blessed to be living here, really. Shall I shut up a bit?
No, enthusiasm and love is important. So you brought your beautiful vessels with you, and the colors, we can see already the colors of the environment in your vessels.
So these are, I don't know if you can see this one, this is a shoreline. So all these shapes are what's left when the white wave, when the wave breaks and it just I can't think of the word, disperses, the white froth disperses and makes all these little shapes and forms, and then from within that you get all these amazing bubbles, and they just kind of come up to the surface. And the shape and the form of this is a kind of mold that I made, which is reminiscent of the sand pools that you get left behind by the receding tide. So you've got these beautiful little sand pools that there's a little bit of water left in them, and you can still kind of see these amazing shapes every single day. You kind of, it doesn't matter when that tide recedes, those sand pools are always different. This place is never the same from 1 hour to the next. And I think that for me is just so key to what interests me. It's every day is a journey of discovery. Every day's enlightenment. Every day's playing like a child. It's kind of walking across and being mesmerized by what you see and what's around you, and kind of that's what I've been brought up on. I've been brought up to look at the sky, to see what the day is doing, to be calmed by this place, to just be grounded and not have that materiality. It's about being in an environment that completely calms you and connects you with nature. And that's just absolutely fundamental to kind of my practice. So everything that I make, everything is about bringing this place, this outdoor space, back into my home. So if I can't get to the beach, I can see that on the worktop, I can see that on the table, and I'm instantly back at a beach. It doesn't have to be Fistral, it could be anywhere in the world. It could be Bali, it could be America, it can be absolutely anywhere. It's just that sense of place that you get. And with that, the kind of, although the inspiration comes from the topography, the flora and the fauna, what it actually encompasses is the amount of connections I have to other people. So my sister-in-law stood here filming, and she's been getting emotional. These are about people. These are about emotions. These are about the connections that you get. Yeah, it's about that shoreline, but that shoreline represents the walks that I've had with people that are really, really special to me. They represent inspirational moments. They represent opportunities to kind of discover and explore with family and friends. But they also, when they're in your home, or for me, the connection and the narrative is actually, they also allow me to dream, to think of far away places that I want to visit, that I haven't visited, and kind of, they give you that kind of joy of remembering childhood when you think of far away places that you want to visit. And it gives me that sense of being and going places, I suppose. God, you need to shut me up, Isabel.
No, I don't want to shut up that that emotion and that raw emotion. Tell me, why glass then?
That's an interesting one, and I've worked in many mediums over the years, but I think glass, there's a certain fragility about it, and the way that I work and the way that my inspiration comes to me is about those connections to people and places, and how those people and places can actually shape you as a person as you grow and as you age. And like Ali was saying earlier, that her family holidays were by the sea. I've lived and been brought up by the sea, but I walk on a daily basis, and I look at this, it changes every single day, but every single day it blows me away. It absolutely blows me away. But there's a huge fragility to our environment. There's a fragility to the memories that we make and what we do. And glass kind of has that fragility, but it also has the ability to be remade, and repurposed. And it's made from sand. There's the sand connection is there. The sand element is throughout my work. So I use this stuff. It's carcinogenic, so I won't open the lid and breathe it in, but it's powder, it's glass powder. But for me, that's like working in sand. So I can use this powder, and I can manipulate this powder. So the shapes that we had on those other forms were where I've put this powder and placed it down on the surface, and then I've pressed it and compacted it and fired it, and then cold worked it until I get these shapes and forms that are really crisp. Or I can simply just sieve it like the buoy vessels, the sand is sieved over the top and layered over the top to get different hues of colour and different depths of colour. So it's almost like I'm playing. I've drawn in the sand since I was born. I've been on the beach since I could walk, or probably before actually. My parents were Geordies, or are Geordies, and brought us down here really early. And my dad was an amazing surfer. We were always on this coast. We lived on the south coast at the time, but we were always on this coast. And this is in your blood. You can take me away from Cornwall, but you can't take Cornwall away from me. You know, you can take me away from the beach, but I gravitate back to it. I start getting fractious and itchy if I can't get back to the sea in any shape or form. So yeah, I think if I've been lucky to live where I do.
So I'm interested in the, you mentioned a little earlier, the boy collection. Tell us a little bit about that collection. Show it to us, maybe bring us one of the vessels and tell us about it, because it's a very meaningful story.
So the boys actually came out of COVID, believe it or not, where I needed to reconnect with my studio and get back into making. And I needed something that kind of, we're all in lockdown. I needed something to kind of dream about again. We were stopped from walking very much or doing very much. So it was my kind of time to come back to it. Now, and these represent like a really bright colour when you go into the harbour. For me, the boys are sitting on the bench overlooking Mevergizzy and having fish and chips with mum and dad. It represents cycle rides into the harbours and sitting down with a picnic and just watching the boats bobbing around and the boys coming in and out. But for others, these boys have different representations. So if you ask a fisherman's wife, she might be waiting for that boat to come back in, and you get the bright light of that boy coming in and coming towards you. The fisherman might have a different idea, but the boys, they're about adventure. They're about the seas and the dangerousness of the seas, and the kind of, are they going to be looked after out there? Are people going to be cared for? Are they just the food source? You see them bobbing around here, and there's loads of crab pots and lobster pots. So you've just got these bright things jumping around, so they know where their food is. They can go and get their food or their livelihood. So the boys are about that adventure, that kind of excitement, inspiration, and they're really organic and lovely to hold. The outside is actually really shiny, but the inside has been, you probably can't see, but it's been sandblasted. So It's got like a matte sheen. And that kind of is like the boys. So if you've got, some of them I haven't sandblasted the inside because they're like the virgin boys. They're going out to sea for the first time. They haven't had any experiences. They haven't got any tales to tell. Whereas these, they've been worn by the sea, and they've done multiple journeys, and they've had knocks and bangs, but they've got stories to tell. They've got hidden depths to them. So they conjure up adventure for me, adventure and kind of seafaring and imagination. So there's always a
Helen, is are your bowls food safe? Can we use them to make a salad in it, or is it just decorative?
You could, yeah, you could. They're all of them have been the colours on the outside rather than on the inside. They'd be quite an expensive salad bowl, if I'm honest. But they tend, for me, they're more sculptural because they have that narrative behind them, and the way that I connect to them. I want other people to connect. What is it that they see? Why are they drawn to the shoreline? Is it because they've got past memories like Ali's got of being on the beach and splashing in the waves, or have they got secret walks that they've had with their partner, or have they got a secret place that they go to? And it's that it kind of captures for those people. It's something special and intimate that's within them, and they're precious. So it's that precious side of things that that's how I view them. But yeah, if you want salad in them, they're more than you're very welcome to have salad in them.
Can we have a look at some of the other patterns and models? Because I mean, I love the fact that the sun is on them, and we can see the ones on the grass. We can see behind them the blue of the sea and almost the yellow of the sand, and we can see that they have been inspired completely by. These are phenomenal.
So these you've got. So quite often when that water's dispersed, you get all of you can see straight down into the sea. So that's kind of representative of those. But some of the other shapes and forms you've got here, they're actually, I don't know if you can see the hedgerows. You get a lot of let me scan. So these little fellas are often represented in the shapes that I form and I make. So some of the shapes that I see within the hedgerow.
We've lost you, Helen.
And then some of these other shapes are kind of, these are all representative of the coast path when you're walking the coast path, and you just see it winds and turns, and these are representative of those coast path walks as you go. So they're pretty much this. I don't know what it's like over there, but over here we have amazing pops of yellow. They just keep popping up, and my eye's always drawn to that. There's yellow over in the background there that's just popping away, and there's some yellows here, and the lichen, we've got like bright yellow lichen and bright orange lichen, and that's also brought through to a lot of my work.
Mm-hmm. And the ones that are on the image has gone a little fuzzy, so I think I'd like to see some of the pieces on the rock, and then I'm afraid we might have to adjourn. Yes, the ED makes the comment that your patterns make her think of the Matisse cutout. You know, Matisse the painter.
Ah,
and
yeah. Oh, that's lovely. So which ones can I cut? Do you want to see the patterned ones or the plain ones?
So you have plain ones there. Let's have one more look at your yellow, because you were talking about the yellow, and yeah, those are beautiful. So yeah. You start from a flat sheet of glass, and then you do the color, and then you create your mold, and it melts into your mold. Is that right?
So the mold, the glass is flat, and then let me just explain. So the glass is flat. Can you see that, Isabel? The glass is flat like that, and then I have an aperture. So there's a big hole, and the flat glass is put on top of that aperture, and then as it heats up, it drops through the aperture. And you end up with this weird shape of like flat glass here, and then this body underneath it. And then from that, I then have to cut the top off. I have to cut that top off, and then I have to use cold working techniques to grind down the surface so that I end up with the shape and the form that I actually want to produce. So, and you can do multiple firings to get different colors and different hues within the work as it's finished. But some of the patterns ones you saw, I actually work with powder, and I compact it and I shape it, and then I use like a grinding tool to round off the shapes, make the shapes how I want. I can make them into a pebble shape, I could make them circular. It just depends on the design I'm trying to achieve. Right. So it's a lot of hands-on and manipulation that goes on. So it's not just sheet glass. So it's much more organic.
And the one last comment before we wrap up is that you never quite know what the design is going to be at the end, because there's that you start from a flat sheet and then it's being deformed by the heat and the melting process.
There's an element. I've been doing them for so long now that I know where I place the design and how it will be affected. So if I place a lot of design right up by the rim, that's going to really stretch into the surface. If I place the design down the bottom, that's pretty much, I know how gravity is going to take the shape down. I know how that's going to work. So I'll end up, I might want the shape here. So I'll end up, when I'm working with the flat sheet, placing it there so that I know where it's going to end up at the end. So my firings take a long time and they're very, very slow, so that I can really manipulate and really keep an eye on the shape and the form that I want. I purposely don't want my shapes to hit the bottom very often, because I actually like that really organic shape. That works for me. That's like the pools you see around here. It's organic, and that the organicness of the whole thing and the control is always a pleasure and a joy to do. Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, it's again another extraordinary connection between the place, the process, the inspiration, and we can so see it. And I'm so glad we were able to be on top of the cliff there and have the place in the background and the art in the foreground. So absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Helen.
It's been a pleasure.
Fantastic. I want to really thank you, all our artists, and Hayley for welcoming us, for having us with you, and the audience. I think that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you did. If you have questions, please connect with the makers. If you have commissions, you know, I always encourage you to connect with the makers and the artists. I am going to be in the UK in the fall. I know that Edie will be there, part of it, and I intend to go and visit a lot of studios. And if I'm hoping I can make my way to Devon and Cornwall, in which case we will do a quick digital visit to our makers. Thank you so very much. If you have any questions, email me. I will send the recording of the tour, the trip, and I will put all the contact details of the makers and their catalog. Please get in touch with them, even if it's just to tell them how much you love them. So thank you so much, and enjoy.